Fuzzy Barbarian back again. What you just saw were clips of gameplay from the final region in Way of the Demon, which is the Dragon of the North DLC stuff and the hardest content in Nioh so far. Every enemy was between 220 and 280 levels higher than me in those clips. Yet despite that, I'm finding the battles to be a walk in the park thanks to my new tanky dual sword build that I'm calling the Sennin build, named so because it makes you feel damn near immortal. Now, you're probably looking at this screen and thinking, oh, I can see you're just using the Tatanashi armor set, big deal, there's nothing new there. If that's what you're thinking, think again. With the introduction of the DLC came a lot of special effect additions, and while the armor set you're seeing here isn't new, and while it does form the base of the build, the true power of the build comes from the unique combination of special effects and perks I've applied to it. I know this truth intimately because I ran with this exact combination of gear from the Dragon of the North DLC in Way of the Strong all the way to completing every mission in Way of the Demon, and I can tell you that even though my base gear combination never changed, the effectiveness of it certainly did mission to mission. There were many times where the struggle became real, and by that I mean a frustrating nightmare. If you've made it to Maria in the Spirit Stone Huntress mission in Way of the Demon, you'll know what I'm talking about. Before I refined the special effects correctly, despite using the exact same gear combination, Maria was destroying me in seconds. I was kind of shocked at the time, actually. So yeah, with Nioh's update, there's a lot more to making builds now than meets the eye just by looking at the armor set being worn. Which, of course, is why it has taken a long time to make this particular build work as well as it does. But now I'm beating every boss or major enemy in the game by going toe to toe with them without a problem, and rarely if ever do I even need to use a health elixir before they are dead, which is pretty damn cool and enough for me to declare this build is a good one. Before we run through the gear perks, take a look at my core stats. It's pretty obvious straight up that I've flipped the usual way to make builds on its head. You can see there that I've ignored weapon scaling stats for the most part. Skill is the primary dual sword scaling attribute, and I've put less points into that than I have magic. The reason for that is Way of the Demon brings a lot of survivability challenges to the table. Having high damage is great, but if that is your focus and you make a mistake or get swamped by enemies that are up to 300 levels higher than you, well, you can very quickly be squished like a bug. To avoid being bug mess, my primary focus here is body, heart and stamina. Body boosts my life, heart boosts my ki, and stamina helps reduce the weight of my armor. Since every armor piece I'm using is heavy armor, that's very important. I'm in Toto Clan for this build, which gives a base perk of plus 5 points for every stamina point. That's 500 extra life just by having 99 stamina. I personally now have an extra plus 7 thanks to clan benefits, so I'm getting an extra 693 life from my 99 stamina, which is pretty huge, and it will go higher than that in due course. Spirit of 10 is all that is needed to equip our two Guardian Spirits of choice, which are Kato and Aya Komori. We could get more damage from a different combination of Guardian Spirits, but for that we'd have to take points away from our other core stats, which essentially means we'd have to reduce our tankiness in favour of more damage, and there's little point to doing that, which I'll talk about in a moment. Besides, these two Guardian Spirits are perfect in combination for our build anyway. Aya Komori is our secondary Guardian Spirit, which gives us an extra 8% attack from behind damage. Kato gives us extra damage perks as well, obviously, but also those sweet ki perks, which are extremely helpful for a heavier build like this. Plus, to get these two Guardian Spirits takes only 10 points, so it's really a no-brainer if we're trying to save on point allocations, which we are. Put no points into dexterity, they aren't needed. There are already enough ninjutsu points ready to allocate to get what we need without it from the start. We don't need to put 28 points into magic to get the magic we'll be using, but we do need to do that amount of points to give us enough magic capacity to equip what we want. If your level is lower than mine, you can put less points into magic here if you want, and just equip a lesser number of casts on the magic items you carry. That's pretty much what I did when I was level 320. I went to level 342 over the course of playing and playtesting. I certainly didn't get to 342 until after I'd beaten every mission. So I know with less points you can still succeed. Just be aware that spirit and magic also affect your defense. So skimp here only if you have to. You can skimp on skill too if you're struggling for points. Less damage is fine basically when you've got no problem surviving. Strength of 17 is necessary to wear the Tatanashi set. I don't know if there's a smithing text available for it yet. There never used to be, and I still haven't found one in the DLC. So yeah, right now as far as I'm aware, you have to get Tatanashi from drops, and for that reason you'll need 17 strength to wear it. I have 8 in here as I'm now at a stage where I'm picking and choosing between skill and strength for where I get the most benefits from each excess point. Oh yeah, you can get Tatanashi to drop off the Revenant above the ladder at the boss shrine in the Spider's Nest Castle mission. That's where I got mine. Either that or just farm Revenants. It seems a lot of people are wearing Tatanashi now, especially in Way of the Demon. So okay, how is it that I'm still killing Way of the Demon enemies relatively quickly, despite putting practically no points into 2 of the 3 scaling attributes of my swords? The first answer is we have 99 in Heart, which is a secondary dual sword scaling attribute, so that definitely helps. But in the end, it comes down to all the various damage perks we have on our gear and in other areas, including saving as many skill points as possible to allocate to the new Melee Mastery skill, which I'll go over in a second. But let's go over the gear and all the perks on them first. My dual sword is a Suraga, Masamune and Hosho Toshiro. I chose this sword as, first and foremost, it's a piece of the Righteous Strategist armor set, and because of that it adds 1.8% extra damage reduction to our build. It also gives 30% Moonshadow damage, which is a dual sword skill, but I don't use that skill. Like I said, save as many skill points as possible to allocate to Melee Mastery, and that means not dumping points into skills you don't use much. Another reason why these dual swords are ideal is because they don't have a slot wasted on an elemental effect. That means you're free to customize all 6 slots with perks of your choice. An elemental perk on a weapon is a waste since its value gets overridden the moment you use an elemental buff. So we've got skill damage, skill key damage, skill damage sign of the cross, skill key reduction, weaken melee weapons, and change to attack heart. Obviously change to attack heart is important as our heart stat is the one with 99 points in it. Notice I don't have final blow damage. That's compensated for by having sign of the cross damage, which can be used effectively on downed opponents too. But unlike final blow damage, sign of the cross damage can also be used effectively on stunned opponents as well, which to get the same damage otherwise you'd need a grapple damage perk on your sword. Also, when enemies are downed, you get the attack from behind perk from the secondary guardian spirit added to the sign of the cross damage too. They do stack, so there's nothing lost there. Now, the real big one here though is weaken melee weapons. When I first saw this, I ignored it. The title sounds, well, basically weak. When you read it, it says, may temporarily weaken an enemy's melee weapon when you land a hit, vastly reducing its attack power and preventing it from triggering special effects. The word may is what made me think, bah, I don't want to use this. But I have to say, I think this perk is great. I haven't crunched any numbers, but this perk has affected my survivability big time. It basically has a chance of applying every 1 in 5 hits. With a repeated hitting skill like Windstorm, it nearly always activates, and it seems to do so on every enemy in the game. At first I thought it would just be humans, but it doesn't seem to be. The result is, every time you hit an enemy, their attacks become super weak towards you. When it says vastly, it means vastly. When added to a tanky build, the damage you start taking is so small it's kinda crazy, and that's why I love this perk. In my second slot is the Atagi Saramuni. As a Kingo set piece, this also gives me 2.1% extra damage reduction, as well as that sweet 15% final blow damage, which given we don't have final blow damage on our sword, is a good perk to have here. The Warrior of the West Bow is in my primary range slot, giving another 2.3% damage reduction. It also has agility damage bonus of A on it, which adds damage based on whether you are A, B or C agility. Most damage is added at A, of course, at about 15% in total. We get about 10% for being at B agility. How we got to B with a heavy armor set I'll go over in a second. The Adagarasu set rifle is in our secondary ranged weapon slot. That's another 1.8% damage reduction. It also gives life recovery from bullseye, which is also okay. It doesn't hurt, I guess. Now to the Tatanashi set itself. Before I get into the special effects, let's talk about the set bonuses. They are mostly about damage reduction. We've got 2.8% damage reduction as a base, 23.4% off firearms damage, 33.1% off elemental damage, and 14% more damage reduction as the 5th set piece perk. All of that is great, especially the elemental damage reduction. With another 66.9% elemental damage reduction from other areas, you can pretty much render all elemental attacks completely void, which you'll see I've done with this build in a moment. The 3 set piece bonus there is equipment weight damage bonus of A. It is based on the total proportion of your weight and not based on your agility, so it's okay to get your armor weight down to B agility and still get a good chunk of extra damage from your weight. In fact, it's beneficial, because the equipment weight damage bonus from a few percentage points of weight, if you were slightly above 70% in equipment weight at a C agility for example, is less than the extra 5% or so damage increase you get from the agility damage bonus perk on our ranged weapon. I've seen some people say reducing your weight defeats the point of this armor set bonus. It doesn't. You'll get more agility damage than you will lose in equipment weight damage by reducing your weight to 70% or under if your weight was just over 70% to begin with. And even if that weren't true, getting your weight down is still essential. The movement speed between B and C agility is extremely noticeable. Against fast opponents like Maria in the Spiritstone Huntress mission, or even against Date Masamune himself, being able to dodge that bit faster can be the difference between coasting through or getting destroyed. So yeah, you definitely want a B agility rating. Perk-wise, I have defense on all but one piece of armor and toughness on 2. I also have attack inherited to every single piece, which is a pretty standard that everybody knows about by now. The first new updated perk I have here is bonus for absorbing Amrita auto recovery. This perk is a match made in heaven for survivability. Basically, you start healing whenever you absorb Amrita. You'll notice in my shortcuts I have an extraction talisman, which gives you Amrita when you hit an enemy. So, pop an extraction talisman before battle and you are guaranteed to be constantly healing for the entire duration of it. It makes a healing noise that might get on the nerves of some, but for me, I like it. If I'm not hearing it, I know it's time to pop an extraction talisman again. Auto healing is also triggered by opening loot boxes too, and this works whether you need healing or not, so if you want healing to be happening even before your battles commence, just pick something up. That's pretty cool. My next perk here is received firearms damage of 13.7%. Add that to the same perk on the Tatanashi set and we're getting almost 39% reduced firearms damage. There are a lot of shooting enemies in the Dragon of the North DLC. They seem to be everywhere, so shaving off their damage by as much as you can is a good move. I was torn on this as I considered putting versus paralysis there, as there are a lot of paralysing enemies in the DLC too. But ultimately paralysis is easily dealt with by having anti-paralytic needles, so I chose needles for a shortcut slot and firearms damage for the special effects slot. A Master Swordsman set chest piece is in my second slot. I chose this piece because first, it's another heavy armor piece. As a base, Clan Toto gives an extra 2% to your attack value for each heavy armor piece equipped, and this increases the longer you're in the clan, so with 5 armor pieces that's an extra 10% to our attack value right off the bat. This chest piece also gives 2.8% extra damage reduction, which is pretty high. But the main reason I wanted this piece here is for the skill key reduction of 15.2%. Combined with our sword skill key reduction of 23.9%, our total key usage is shaved by over 39%. If we enter a critical state, Kato adds another 29% to that for a total of 68% key reduction when we really need it. Kato also gives us 29% key recovery speed and plus 28 to our key level, so basically with the Master Swordsman set here we never have to worry about key, especially if you key pulse or dodge key pulse as well. This is important because in our dual sword skill tree, we're not going to choose the mystic art that perks our key usage, but I'll get to that in a sec. A new perk from the update here is damage reduction status ailment suffered. This is great. What it means is if an enemy puts a status on you, you get an instant 17.6% damage reduction. Now look at my leg armor. You can see I also have bonus for status ailment suffered, increase attack there. I can't remember the numbers offhand, but basically when an enemy hits you with a status, you become harder for the enemy to kill you and it becomes easier for you to kill the enemy. And this happens a lot. You'd be surprised how many times a status ailment gets put on you in mid-battle to trigger this effect. To be honest, I didn't even really notice how many times it had been put on me until I put on these perks and started to actually take notice. So having done that, I really love both of those perks. Next one, you can see there is reduced elemental attack damage. Here it is 22.5%. Add that to Tatanashi's 33.1% and we've got 55.6% reduction in elemental attack. If you look at my prestige points, you can see I also have maxed received elemental damage received elemental attack damage there of 15%. So that totals 70.6%. On my Asakani Magatama, I have 16.2% as well, and on my second accessory, I have 16.1%. That all adds up to 102.9%, which means I do not take any elemental damage at all, ever. Bosses regularly use elemental attacks, both in close and from a distance. This means I'm practically invulnerable to any boss that isn't close, and often invulnerable to them when they are. It also means if I need a breather, I can just back away, and that's it, I don't have to worry. But it's not just bosses this works on. Those pesky wheel monks and their fire breathing, well, they won't hurt you. Tengu shooting you from the air, it doesn't matter. Fire breathing long necks from the thing, they can't hurt you either. And on it goes. Take a look at some examples of this in action for yourself. So yeah, elemental invulnerability is well worth having. Next perk on the Master Swordsman armor is receive damage from attack when critical of 15.9%, just to help if things go south. And on chest pieces, life can get pretty high, so take advantage of it. 127 is a fair bit. On my gloves, I have two really good perks. The first is increase attack and defense for using Kato as our guardian spirit. We get an extra 17 attack and an extra 17 defense. Now, I should point out in the clips at the start of this video, I did not have this perk on. I was very lucky to roll it later. The perk I did have on was Nioh magic duration increase for protection talismans. However, in testing, I realized the duration is only 1 extra second on this build, which is not worth it. So this build I'm showing you now is even more tanky and damaging than what you saw in the clips, which is pretty cool. Just know that this Kato attack and defense increase perk seems to be extremely rare. It took a lot of reforges to get it, so don't hold your breath while you try. The second good perk there is increase attack timely guard, which increases our attack immediately after blocking an attack at the very last moment. Don't ask me what the math is on this one either, as I can't tell you offhand, but it's an attack increase, so even if it's tiny, I'll take it. Since we haven't put any points into our weapon scaling attacks, core stats, it's very important to get as much attack in as many ways as we can added to our perks. On my leg armor, I've already mentioned the bonus attack for status ailments, so the one I'll mention here is the weight reduction perk of 14.8%. This is the perk that, when combined with 99 stamina, helps to get our heavy armor set to be agility. This perk is absolutely essential and can't be compromised on. Without it, you're too slow, and without it, you do less damage. You need 2 of these to get to be agility, which is why I have it on my feet armor as well. To be honest, I don't think many of these perks can be compromised on. It's how they all work in tandem with our allocation of core stats that makes this build work. Even when I've changed just 1 or 2 things here and there for testing, I've noticed a big difference in how the build plays out. So bear that in mind. Way of the Demon is tough, so you need to be on the ball when it comes to how you set up your build. Making slight changes can make a build go from working really well to not working at all. The remaining feet and leg armor slots are for dash endurance and running speed, which are also crucial perks for a heavy armor build, even at B agility. I've also got Yokai close combat damage on both my accessories, in addition to the received elemental attack damage perks. On my Magatama, I've also been lucky to get received firearms damage and unlimited Onmyo 2. With the received firearms damage of 9.6% there, my total firearms damage is now almost halved, which really helps, especially in those missions where there are snipers outside of your reach, and even when you shoot them down, they just respawn, like they do in the Become Thy Enemy mission. Shortcuts wise, mostly from the magic tree, including weakness, protection, and extraction talismans. I already mentioned the extraction talisman is there to keep my healing going. Weakness and protection are obvious and used mainly against bosses or those glowing red enemies that are the new random buffed enemies. Tiger running scroll is there to help me speed through levels, and I already mentioned earlier why I have the anti-paralytic needles there, but if paralysis isn't bothering you, that's a free slot to do as you please. I also already mentioned I used my prestige points to get more received elemental attack damage. In addition, I used those for Yokai close combat damage, human close combat damage, more life, more Onmyo magic power, more toughness, more ki, versus Yokai realm, and more ninjutsu power. The percentages you see there for item drop rate, damage from fall, elixir effect on life recovery, and even versus Yoko Realm are merely the result of excess points, since everything here has a cap. Close combat damage wise, the cap is 15%. For skills, to make the most of the new melee mastery skill, you need to make sure you don't waste points on stuff you're not going to use. So for me, I've put points into every single weapon passive except for those that are weapon specific, which are basically the Adachi and the Axe weapon specific passives. And then the rest of my points went into dual sword specific abilities. Even then, with the skill perks we have here, Windstorm, the Shrike and Sign of the Cross are the three that matter most. You can see everything else I've selected here without me needing to go into them. Just make sure you choose Firm Resolve as your dual sword mystic art. It boosts your defense with each attack you land. This is a big contributing skill factor in your survivability against really tough enemies like the dreaded Maria. There's also plenty of ki in this build already, so losing a bit of ki isn't much of an issue compared to the amount of extra survivability this mystic art gives you. In the end, all that leaves enough points to get melee mastery to plus 80 extra attack from the amount of points I have now. Obviously, you can get more than that as you get closer or right up to level 400. Ninja skills are just Enlightenment, Poison Control, Paralytic Control, Tiger Running, Dashing, Cloud Runner, Dodging, Sneak Attack, Power Pills, and Max Ninja Tool Mastery. Magic includes Weakness, Awakening, Water Talisman, Pure Mind, Pure Heaven, Protection Talisman, Evil Ward, and Extraction Talisman. I put excess points into the Amrita Luck and Gold gains, which is really a bit of a waste. I should have put them into Inanimate Enchantment instead. I might respect to do that if I can be bothered, but I don't really use Living Weapon that much, so I probably won't. In any case, make sure you get Incantation Mastery to the max. It's a must for equipping all your magic. And that's pretty much it for the build. In combination, structuring it this way makes you very survivable even in the hardest modes, but still dealing enough damage to make the encounters go fast enough that your survivability remains high. Before I settled on this exact build though, some bosses like Maria were a handful. Now they aren't. Also, I should point out that my goal in making a Way of the Demon build was to have one build that could handle every encounter without the need to cheese anything. So there's no need to use Sloth or Guardian Spirit Talismans that knock down human enemies or anything like that. This build by itself can do every mission, kill everything, and survive. It's not a farming build of course, but then I don't farm. I have no intention of farming if I don't have to. Pretty much I just want to play and get my resources by doing that and that alone, and this build gives me an all-round build that makes it fun to do so. Just make sure you learn to use Sign of the Cross properly and get a handle on how to do it by cutting its animation short as much as you can, because it's the most damaging move this build has. So yeah, I hope you guys like it. I know once you start trying Way of the Demon for yourself, you'll pretty quickly realize why this build is awesome, especially in the later levels, the last two regions specifically. Anyway, that's it from me. Enjoy guys, and bye for now.